All right, so I've just put the formulas up again for finance. You don't need to screenshot them. That's not necessary. The formulas haven't changed. And I'm going to rewrite the formulas as we go along anyways. So don't you stress at all. Again, we're going to look through some past paper questions working with more specifically the grade 12 formulas. So more specifically your future value formula as well as your present value formula. Reason being is because, as I explained on Monday, the first question that you get in finance is generally just a basic compound or sometimes simple interest question, which this one is. And so I'm not actually going to do the first question here. I'm going to move on to the second one because this is dealing with the grade 12 formulas and actually understanding how to use them, which is, I think, where a lot of the confusion in finance comes with these grade 12 formulas. All right, so that is the POA. These questions are similar to Monday's, but also very different from Monday's because you can see, hopefully by the end of the lesson, the different variations of future and present value questions that we can ask you. All right, so this question says, and this is from 2019 final, 9 years ago, a bank granted Mandy a home loan of, a home loan of 525,000 Rand. This loan was to be repaid over 20 years at an interest rate of 10% per annum, compounded monthly. Mandy's monthly repayments commenced exactly 1 month after the loan was granted. So remember that last sentence, your loan commencing or the repayments of your loan commencing 1 month after the loan was granted. That is a normal loan scenario. We looked at on Monday at a scenario where the payments were delayed. Remember, we looked at that example where the repayments were delayed by 6 months, and we had to then add on the interest for those extra months. But a normal scenario is that you start repayments 1 month after your loan has been granted. So there's nothing weird here that we need to take into consideration. Okay, so I've read it once. I'm now going to read it again with a more critical eye and identify all the important bits of information. So 9 years ago, she was granted a loan of 525,000 Rand. The whole loan had a period of 20 years at an interest rate of 10% per annum compounded monthly. All right, so when I say highlight the important information, your important information is how long, what amount, what interest rate. You need those bits of information in order to answer a question. The next bit of information you need to decide is I need to do some like jumping jacks or something. The next piece of information you need to decide is whether or not this is a loan or whether or not this is an investment. Now, it's very clearly said it's a home loan, which means that there should be no doubt in your mind in terms of which formula you should be using. So remember, anytime it is a loan, we use our present value formula, always. If it is an investment, we use our future value. Investments are for the future, loans are in the present. We want to pay it off now so that we're not in debt. Right, now we can get into the actual question here. So it says, Mandy decided to make monthly repayments of 6,000 Rand instead of the required 5,066 Rand 36 cents. So these are our monthly repayments. The question says, how many payments will she make? Now this statement, how many, is going to be quite important in a second. So I'm actually just going to change the color here. Oopsie. Maybe I'm not. Oh, no, I am. All right, so how many payments? That's going to be quite important for us in a second. Now, if you think about your present value formula, you have got x1 minus 1 plus I to the power negative n all over I. The how many, that is referring to our exponent. So what we are trying to solve here is for the value of n. Now that's important to know because anytime you are solving for a value of n in a compound interest or in an exponential position, you're going to need to use logs. So we haven't done a logs question yet. This is now an example where you would need to use logs. Right, so we're going to substitute in the values that we know. This PV means your loan amount. So how much do you currently owe on your loan? We took out a loan of 525,000 Rand. And so right at the start of this period, that was how much was owed on our loan. We were told that the monthly repayments were increased to 6,000 Rand. We were told that the interest rate was 10% compounded monthly. And we're obviously solving for n. And so now we can start to solve for our unknown. Now, guys, remember, when you are solving for an exponent, what you want to try and do is get that exponent to a singular base equals an answer. That's how we work with logs. So the first thing I'm going to have to do here in terms of trying to get my exponential term alone is I'm going to have to multiply both sides here by my denominator. I am just doing this so that you understand where all of the values come from. And that gets rid of my fraction on the right-hand side. Now, 525,000 Rand divided by 0.11 or 12% compounded monthly gives me 35 over 48. So the simplified fraction here, 35 over 48 when you do the multiplication by 0.11 over 12. Okay, we are then left with, on the right-hand side, that also doesn't give you that. I'm just talking nonsense. It gives you 4,375 Rand. That's the next one. Sorry, guys. Getting ahead of myself. Okay, let's say it again. When you times the 525,000 Rand by 0.11 over 12, you get 4,375. I do apologize. Like I say, I got a bit excited. Equals 6,000 times the bracket. So my bracket, 1 minus blah, blah, blah. Right, now we're going to divide both sides by 6,000. This gives me 35 over 48. Now I'm swapping my numbers, so that's great. Which is 1 minus 1 plus, and if you say 1 plus 11% compounded monthly, you get 121 over 120. So this bracket simplified, you just add those two things together, 121 over 120, all to the power negative n. Right, this stuff is just really tedious because there's so much inverse operations we need to do. Right, we're going to subtract 1 on both sides, which leaves me with negative 13 over 48 is equal to negative 121 over 120 to the power negative n. Both of these terms are negative, so you can just swap them on your equation, or you can divide by a negative 1, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. But actually, we're just working with positive values here. So 121 over 120 to the power negative n is equal to 13 over 48. Right, now, because you've got a singular exponential term equals a value, now we can convert this to a log format. I don't know how many of you find converting logs easy. My brain doesn't compute log conversions for whatever reason. So this is the way I remember it. It's log of your base to your answer equals your exponent. I'll explain what all of these things mean now in a second if that doesn't make sense. Your equals exponent. All right, so your base is the base to the exponent, so the base value, in this case, the 121 over 120. This is my base. Your answer is what that exponential term was equal to. So in this case, the 13 over 48, that's the answer, is equal to the exponent, which is obviously that power negative n that we are looking at. Terrible, terrible color choice that I've made here. Let's make a better choice. Okay. So that's how I do log conversions. It's just the easiest way for me to remember it. I still have to say it under my breath when I do it because my brain just works like that. So we've got log of your base, so 121 over 120 to the 13 over 48 is equal to negative n. Now you just type that log situation into your calculator and you get negative n is equal to negative 157,402,420, etc., etc., etc. Again, both of those terms are negative. So actually all you have here is n equals 157 and all those decimals. All right, so my question to you is, How do we write this final answer? Do we leave it as a decimal? Do we round it off? What do we do? Given the fact that the question said how many payments. So what do I now do with this answer? Barato?
Ma'am, I got a different answer for N. I'm not sure how.
What did you get?
I got 9,761, like a long decimal times
Did you
10.
type in the same expression here?
Yes, ma'am. I typed in log and then the base with the answer.
Okay. Let's just double check the situation. Okay, I'm going to put a calculator onto the screen. And we'll do it together just to check our situation. Window, entire screen. Okay. All right, so let's just have a look. Atasha though, love it. I'm going to get to you now. Right, let's just double check. So we would say log. Oh, is my calculator just weak? It's obviously just weak. No, mine only works with base 10. Okay. All right, it's fine. It's fine. I have another solution to the problem. Okay. So I just have to unpack my bag to get a calculator. All right. I have a problem with stationery. This is one of my pencil bags that I take to school every single day because, like I say, I have a problem. All right, so let's get rid of this calculator because that was completely useless to me. And we'll just do this again. All right, so we type in log of our base 121 over 120 to 13 over 48. So there is everything typed in exactly as I've written it down. And we get negative 157,402. So Lorato, just double check. Make sure your calculator, there shouldn't be anything weird in terms of the settings. So just type it again for me. If it's still weird, then I might need you to put on your camera so I can look at your calculator.
Okay, ma'am. I think probably I used the other log. Yeah, I think.
What other log?
The one that is like uppers the second row. There's the one there with like the two rectangles.
Oh,
then
okay.
there's the other one. So I think I used that one, which gave me that. Yes, ma'am. That's one.
Okay. So guys, this is actually a really important point. So this log, okay, my buttons unfortunately don't exist on my calculator. This calculator has been with me for probably about 15 years. So she's a bit old, which is fine. We don't judge her. Okay. So there we go. You've got two log buttons. You have got that log button over there that just says log, and then you've got the log button over there with the rectangles. You want to use the log button with the rectangles because the log button without the rectangles, so that one over there next to the exponent, it's not very clear, but that one next to the exponent, that one works with a base of 10. It automatically assumes that your base is 10. So that's more like exponential scientific formats, which we don't want here. So you want to work with the one that with two rectangles that you can type in your own base. All right, so there we go. We figured out the problem.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, pleasure. All right, so my question was, what do we do with this answer? Atasha, lovely, lovely, lovely. We need to round off to the nearest whole number. Now, again, we just need to think carefully. And I'm going to do a little tangential question here in a second. There are two parts to this number. There's the whole number of 157, and then there's a decimal. So this 157 represents 157 full payments. Full. The decimal represents part of the 158. And so we're going to do a little question here in a second, just so that you can understand how we could potentially work with this and what you could potentially be asked. Even though it's 157 full payments and just a part of the 158, the question said how many payments, not how many full payments, not how many payments of 6,000 Rand, just how many payments. And so, yes, even though you are only making a partial payment as your 158 payment, you are still making a payment. And so what we would need to do with this answer is we would need to round this up to 158 payments. 157 would be just too few. 158 will definitely ensure that our loan is settled. Yes, whenever you get this decimal situation, yes, this decimal of 0.40, that technically should not round up according to our rounding rules. However, if you round it down, you would be just short of settling your loan. So we would have to round it up to ensure that the loan is in actual fact settled. You are making 158 payments. It's just that 158th payment is not a full 6,000 Rand payment. Right, so I'm going to just take a second here. Does everyone understand what I've just said? Because I do want to do a little extra question here, because we could ask you this type of question. And so, oh gosh. And so I just want to show you how you would deal with it. But does everyone understand what I've said here in terms of the payments? Excuse, sorry. Lovely. Okay. And guys, again, if at any point you don't understand, please just let me know. I know that finance, especially with like the language and the terminology, it is a lot. You're going to see this next question. I had to read it like 3 times before I understood what was going on. So you'll probably understand straight off the bat. I was just having a day. But read carefully, ask questions, make sure you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so we're not going to move to the second question just yet. I want to show you how we could follow on from this whole thought process that we've just had here. So how we could follow on from using this decimal as a sort of additional question that I could ask. So an additional question we could ask is, what is the value of the final payment? So how much does she pay in that 158th payment? Now, the reason this is an important thing to be able to do is because in real life, often your loans, that final payment is not the same as your monthly repayments. So we know that every month she's been paying 6,000 Rand. What often happens with a loan is that last payment is different. Sometimes it's a bit bigger, sometimes it's a bit smaller, but it's often different to take into account you needing to pay off all of the interest that you owe or that remains on your loan agreement. And so often that final amount is a little bit different. And this is where the decimal comes in. So like I said, you've made 157 full payments. That is a full 6,000 Rand that you've paid. However, this 158 payment only represents 0.402420 blah, blah, blah of my 6,000 Rand monthly repayment. I'm only paying a portion of it. I'm not paying the full 158th payment. I'm just paying a portion of it. So in this question, what is the value of the final payment? We now work only with our decimal, and we now need to bring in a balance outstanding calculation. Just grab a little pen here because there's a little note that we need to take note of. So this is going to require us to work with a balance outstanding. Now, balances outstanding are on loans and loans only. You can't have an outstanding amount on your own investment. It's a balance outstanding on a loan, which means it is your present value formula. And what I just want you to take note of is that when you are calculating a balance that is outstanding on your loan, your end value is the number of payments still to be made. And so in this case, the number of payments we still have to make is the 0.402088, blah, 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 blah. Lorato?
Ma'am, do you mind re-explaining when you were still like substituting all the values into the formula? Because from there I couldn't hear you anymore.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so I'm going to go back to that point, and it seems like that's where I had my moment. Okay, so again, we're working out the balance outstanding. We want to work out how much we owe on the loan after the last full payment has been made. And just remember that when you do work out your balance outstanding, your N is the number of payments that you still need to make. So the number of payments we still needed to make is represented by this decimal. It's not the full 158th payment, it's just a portion of. So we substitute into our present value formula, because remember, present value is for loans. We are working out the present value, the present amount I currently owe on my loan, which will be my final repayment. And I substitute in. So the monthly repayments is 6,000, but this exponent is now going to take the portion of it that I owe for this last little bit. So it won't be the full 6,000. It's going to work it out proportionally for me. The interest is also the same, 11% compounded monthly. And then we get a amount of 2,400 Rand 51 cents. So this amount that we've just worked out, there we go, 51 cents. This amount that we've just worked out is this 158th payment. It's a small little portion that we need to pay right at the end, just to make sure that all of the interest is paid off. My entire loan is settled. I owe nothing more to my bank. Okay, so this is just like a question that they could ask, and I want you to be able to do it because it really isn't tricky. It's just understanding the fact that the decimal, if you are solving for N and you get a decimal, represents a portion, a part payment, not a full monthly payment. It just represents part of the monthly payment that you need to make in order to consolidate and settle your loan. Right, does that make sense? I'm going to wait here in case you want to screenshot. I probably need to make it a bit smaller in case you want to actually see the question. Lorato?
Ma'am, with the decimal, is there a specific way that we have to like write it, like to 3 decimals, or can it be more than 3? Because I also got 2,400, but then instead of 51, I got 39.
How many decimals did you use?
I used 4.
Okay, so I used the full decimal here. So I used everything. I would have saved it on my calculator. So my calculator would have given me the 157,40 whatever. So I would then just subtract 157 to just get the full decimal. And then I would just use my answer button. However, generally we say 5 to 6 decimals to get a relatively accurate answer. We're not super strict about the decimals, but try and use as many as you can. So generally the advice is 5 to 6 decimals should be fine. Otherwise,
Okay,
the answer
ma'am.
button.
Thank you, ma'am.
Pleasure. Okay, so guys, that is an important point. If you do use rounded off values, so let's say for example, you rounded off this decimal in this question to 157,40, and that's what you then substituted into this balance outstanding calculation. Your answer is going to be different. You've used a rounded off value. So that's why I'm saying now try not to round off or try to use 5 or 6 decimal places, but you have the answer button. So you can just subtract the whole number of full payments and then you're left with just the decimal part and then you can just use your answer button. Right, I'm hoping we've all got screenshots. And again, if you have questions, you just ask. But let's have a look at the actual second question that was asked here. I just showed you this because it is one that we can ask. And like I said, it's not a hard question. It's just we need to remember what to do here. Right, so the second question says, after making monthly repayments of 6,000 Rand for 9 years, Mandy required money to fund her daughter's university fees. She approached the bank for another loan. Instead, the bank advised Mandy that the extra amount repaid every month could be regarded as an investment and that she could withdraw this full amount to fund her daughter's studies. Calculate the maximum amount that Mandy may withdraw from the loan account. Right, so like I said, I have to read this twice because I was not sure what was happening initially. But once we know, we're good. So after making monthly repayments of 6,000 Rand for 9 years. So for 9 years, she has paid the bank 6,000 Rand every single month to repay her loan. After those 9 years, she now has to pay for her daughter to go to university. And so instead of granting her another loan, the bank said, okay, but you've already been paying us extra anyways. Because remember at the start of this question, it said that the required monthly amount or the required monthly repayment was only 5,066 Rand 36 cents. So she decided to pay an extra couple hundred Rand every month in order to repay her loan. So they said, okay, well, you've already been paying us extra anyways. We're just going to take that extra that you've been paying us and reinvest it for you. And what you can then do is you can then take that investment and all of the interest it earns, and you can then use that amount to pay for your daughter's university. And so that's what this last little paragraph is saying. So instead of the bank, she's got this investment, etc., etc. So the key thing here is the fact that we're now moving into an investment scenario. So we're now moving into a scenario where it is appropriate for me to be using my future value formula. This is future value. It's an investment. Right, the rest of it we have already. Does this make sense to everyone before I carry on? What we need to do? Or what the scenario is, rather. And again, if it doesn't, you just need to ask. It's a lot of words. Alrighty, I'm going to assume that we're good. I did see a thumb up or two. Okay, so we're moving into an investment scenario. So we're moving into our future value scenario, which is X. I always forget future value for some reason. I don't know why. 1 plus I to the power n minus 1 all over I. Alrighty, so we want to figure out what the future value of our investment will be. So we're looking for the future or the F value. We know that every single month she paid an additional or an extra little bit. So what we first need to work out is how much extra was she paying, because that extra money is going to be my monthly investment into this account. So we would take the 6,000, subtract the 5,066, and that gives me 933 Rand 64 cents. So this amount is what she invests each month. And so this amount is our X value. So we've got 933.64 cents. Bracket 1 plus the interest rate. Now remember, the interest rate is what we were quoted at the beginning, 10% per annum compounded monthly, to the power of, now remember, it was 9 years that she made payments and they needed the money. So 9 years for 12 months every year, that is 108 payments with that extra amount there. So my exponent would be 108 minus 1 all over my I value. Alrighty, and then you just punch that into your calculator and you end up with 162,503 Rand 51 cents. So that is how much she has available to her after 9 years of paying this extra 933 Rand and then investing it available to her to pay for her daughter's university fees. All right, so again, here, the second I saw that word investment, I was like, cool, I need to swap up my formula and I need to change it. The next little bit that we needed to take into account is how much extra she was paying, because that was the amount that would be invested for her. But all the other information you already have. You knew it was for 9 years, you know it was every single month, so 9 times 12, and you knew the interest rate. So not a hard question, just understanding what the question was saying to us. Okay, Lorato?
Ma'am, the 9 times 12 the 12 part from the 9 times 12 comes from the compounded monthly, right? Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so guys, that 9 times 12, you always need to take into your compounding. You need to take into account your compounding period. So if it had been like 10% compounded quarterly, then we would have times that by 4. So always just remember your end value must take into account your compounding period, same as your interest must be divided by the compounding period. You do get marks for taking those things into account. All right. I can't remember if you, I think you did screenshot the other thing, but I always panic. Okay, there we go. That's both of them. I'm just panicking that I didn't actually say screenshot because of all the connectivity chaos that we had. So there's both of them. Yeah, obviously, again, if you've got questions, just ask. And then we're going to have a look at another one that's also a loan scenario. But this is a slightly different question where we talk about interest now, like the actual interest amount that you end up paying. And so little difference, little time consuming, but hopefully not too tricky once we get into it. Lorato?
Ma'am, I have a question with the interest for the second question. So will it always be the same interest as the one from the previous question, or is it possible that they give us a question whereby they give us a different type of interest to use to
So
calculate?
they definitely could. Personally, if I was studying this exam, I would have given you a different type of interest. But if they don't, then yes, assume it's the same interest rate as before.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
Okay, so they definitely can, but then they'll put it in the question and they'll say an investment that charges interest at whatever. So then they will specify what interest rate to use. Alrighty. Right, okay, so again, I'm just skipping this first one because this is like grade 11 and we actually did pretty much the same question on Monday. So we're going to move into the actual fun stuff. Right, so we're going to Pete. Right, Pete takes out a loan from a bank to buy a car for 235,000 Rand. He agrees to repay the loan over a period of 54 months. The first installment will be paid 1 month after the loan is granted. The bank charges interest at 11% per annum compounded monthly. So remember, 1 month after the loan is granted, that is normal for when you first start making your repayments. So there's nothing weird there. We're happy with everything we've been given. Right, again, we go back to our question and now we start to think or read it more critically. Grab a highlighter, grab a pen, grab whatever you want, and we go through this again, like I say, more critically. So the loan amount, the amount that he loans is the 235,000 Rand. The period of my loan, 54 months. The first installment is paid 1 month after, so it's a normal loan situation. There's no delayed repayments like we had on Monday where we have to add interest. There's none of that. It's normal. And the interest is charged at 11% per annum compounded monthly. They really enjoy using compounding monthly. Like every single question we've done, yesterday, Monday and today has been compounded monthly. They've yet to use a different compounding period. But anyways. So the first question says, calculate Pete's monthly installment. Perfect. No problem. It's a loan, so loan, which means I need to use present value formula. I've been given all the information I need in order to do that, so we just go substitute in. Now, I am not going to rewrite the formula because I think I've done that enough. 235,000 Rand is equal to, we want the monthly installment, so we're calculating X. Okay. 1 minus 1 plus I, 11% compounded monthly to the power of, now remember it's it's how many payments you need to still make, or it's the full 54 payments, so for 54 months, all over our I value, 11% compounded monthly. Just remember the P value is the amount that you currently owe on your loan. So how much is still owed on the loan? It's the full amount. So all you do now is you go and solve. So the first thing that I would do, I'm just going to show the steps so that we all know where the values are coming from, is to times both sides by the 0,11 over 12 because that gets rid of my fraction. I wrote 1, and that gives me a not so nice number. 2,154,16 recurring is equal to X. And if I type all of that into my calculator to get the value of my bracket, 0.38905, and there's a whole bunch of decimals. Right, now I just divide both sides by that bracket of 0.38905, etc., to get x, and x is then 5,536 Rand 95 cents. So that is how much he needs to pay per month in order to pay off his loan to buy his car. Nothing tricky, using the formula, simple. Okay, I'm just going to wait if we have any questions on this one before I move on to the next one, because the next one is rather tedious and we need to understand what we're doing when we actually answer this question. So if any questions about this one, and then I'll move on. Rato?
So, ma'am, since also here we also pay like a month after we receive the loan, we wouldn't have to like maybe deduct or add an extra month to the months that we have to have paid.
No,
Oh,
because
okay.
like I say, a normal loan scenario is that you only start repaying 1 month after your loan is granted. If they said you only started paying 6 months after your loan is granted, like the question we did on Monday, then you would have to do an interest calculation. But the norm is that it's 1 month after your loan is granted. If that's what it says and that's when you start paying, no extra months or anything needs to be done. Awesome. Okay, so question 2 says, calculate the total amount of interest that Pete will pay during the first year of the repayment of the loan. Okay, so a couple of things we need to just take into account here. First thing is I'm asking for the amount of interest. So basically, how much extra did he pay on the first year because that 11% per annum compounded monthly was added. And secondly, it's only during the first year. So I don't care how much interest he paid in the first 2 years, the first 4 years. No, I just care about in the first year of this repayment of my loan. Now, Great Tools, there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. And if you would like to see some other ways, this was 2017's paper. Excuse me. This was 2017's paper. You can go and look at the memo alternatives. I think there were 3 different memo alternatives that were presented. The way I'm going to do it, I think, is the easiest way because there's literally 4 steps that you need to remember and follow, and you will be fine for every single question that asks you about interest. However, if you would like to go and have a look at the other ones, by all means, go for it. They are alternative methods for a reason. You are welcome to go and have a look and see if you would like to. It is a 6-mark question, which is why I'm going to show you the way that I would do it, because like I say, it's 4 steps. If you do those 4 steps, you're going to get 6 marks. All right, so we need to work out a few things, because in order for us to figure out the amount of interest that has been paid in the first year, we first need to figure out, well, how much did he actually pay in the first year? So if we take into account the monthly amount or the monthly repayment that we've just worked out, and we times that by 12, how much has he actually paid in the first year? We then need to consider how much is still owed on my loan, and I'll get to why that is in a second. We then need to figure out how much of the original loan amount he has actually paid off, and then we can go and determine our interest. And I'll explain why all of these things need to happen as we get these amounts. Okay, so first things first is how much has he actually paid on the loan? How much has been repaid? And all we do here is we take that monthly amount that we just calculated and we times it by 12. Why by 12? Because it's only for the first year of my loan. So I don't care about anything more than that. And obviously 12 months in a year. So this comes to 66,443 Rand 40 cents. So every single month he paid his 5,536 Rand. And so that accumulates to a total year-long repayment value of 66,443. So that's how much he's repaid. Like I said, the second thing that we want to do here is we want to calculate how much is still owed on the loan. I'm going to get this answer and then I'll explain why we want this amount. Now remember, when we want to work out how much is still owed, this is a balance outstanding situation. You've paid the first year. How much do you still owe for the remaining time period? So we know that the period of this loan was 54 months and you've already paid the first year. So we can get rid of those first 12 months. That's been dealt with. I want to figure out how much I still owe for the remaining 42 months. So this will be my end value that I work with because that's how much that is the period over which I still owe money. Okay, so again, loan scenario, it means present value. You're working out your p-value. You're working out the present value of your loan after a year's worth of repayments. So 5,536, blah, 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 95. It was at an interest rate of 11% per annum, compounded monthly. And now my exponent is negative 42. Again, that exponent represents how many payments you still need to make. We still need to make 42 payments. And this tells me that I still owe on my loan 192,296 Rand 20 cents. So of that original loan amount, of that 235,000 Rand, I still owe 192,296 Rand. Now that's important to know how much we still owe because now we can work out how much have we actually paid off. Right, and so all we do here is we take the loan amount, the 235,000 Rand, whoops, sorry, and we subtract what we still owe. Apparently that's a subtraction sign. Okay. Minus. And we get that we still owe on this original loan amount 42,703 Rand 80 cents. Right, I'm just gonna hang on a second here just so we understand what's happening. So I have worked out how much he's paid. Now remember these monthly repayments that you have worked out. So over here, these monthly repayments. This includes interest. Remember your monthly repayment of a loan includes all the interest, which means this amount over here is your year's worth of repayments, including interest. So we're going to make a little note. So this all includes interest. Right, this value over here, how much you have left to pay of your loan, this doesn't include interest because by nature of your formula, what it's doing is it's taking your monthly repayments, essentially it's taking off all of the interest that would have been accumulated over however long the period is, whatever you're working with. In this case, we were working 42 months. And we're going back to, of this original loan amount, so before any interest was added, what do you still owe? And so this amount that we worked out here is saying, excluding any sort of interest, what do we still owe of the 235,000 Rand? And this is now where our final step comes in. We've got an amount right at the top that includes interest. So we know how much he's repaid, including interest. We know how much he's paid, excluding interest. And so the interest is now the difference between the two. So 66,443 Rand 40 cents minus 42,703 Rand 80 cents. And so he's paid rather interest of 23,739 Rand 60 cents. That is the interest amount. So again, we got an amount that he's paid including interest. We've got an amount that he has repaid on the loan excluding interest. And because it's over the same 1 year period that we're looking at, The difference between the two is how much interest he's actually paid. So how much extra has he had to pay off in that year because he took out a loan that earns interest? Now, again, there are other ways to do this question. This is not the only way to do the question. You're welcome to go look at alternatives. But like I say, for me, this is how I do it because it's 4 steps that I know how I can calculate each one. I know like how to apply my formulas. I know how to subtract. It's things that I know how I can do. Apparently you cannot speak English. And so if I can break down my working out into 4 steps that I know I must follow, then it's easy. Because if I get step 1 right, that's 1 mark. If I get step 2 right, that's another 3 marks. So I'm already at, 67% for this question. If I then get step 3 right, that's another mark. And if I work out the interest in step 4, that's my 6th mark. So if you go step by step, it just means that as you work through each step correctly, you're accumulating your marks as you go along. Rather than looking at a question like this and not knowing where to start and then losing all 6 marks, I've given myself a guide, a roadmap. If I follow these 4 things, I'm going to get marks. Maybe I make a mistake somewhere along the line and things don't go right, but I've given myself this roadmap, which means that I have done working out. And so my marker can see what I've done and can hopefully give me some of those 6 marks. Alrighty, so this last question, definitely a trickier one because of the whole calculate the interest and because we're having to work with balance outstanding calculations. I don't like balance outstanding for whatever reason. I don't know. But anyways, but like I say, guys, harder questions, and this is the case in anything, and we'll actually talk about this more as we start to prep for trials. If you struggle with certain types of question, make a roadmap for yourself. So what I mean by that is write down you have to follow to get an answer. For example, trig equations, general solution. There are like 4 or 5 steps that I can write down for you that if you follow them, you're going to get a solution. So if you find general solution and trig equations hard, remember 5 steps and then you do it. There's nothing that, I mean, things can go wrong, but you can follow those 5 steps and you can bank some marks. When it comes to things like sigma notation and sequences and series, there are things that you can do to start that will gain you marks. So when you do come across questions that are trickier, write a little roadmap for yourself, have it next to you so that when you encounter that next question when you're practicing a new past paper, you have the roadmap for yourself, you follow the steps, and you bank some marks. All right, I'm aware of the fact that it's 7 o'clock and that I've been talking about stuff that I'm going to talk to you about next week anyways. So anywho, there it is for you to screenshot. I will wait another minute or 2 in case you've got any last questions on this last one. Otherwise, I will see you on Monday where we're going to start with functions and graphs, revising for trial exams, mock exams, which many of you are starting in about a week's time, which is frightening. Sorry. Lorato?
I have a question when it comes to like multiplying with basically the compounded monthly multiplying on the period. So does it only apply to like when we're working with investments, or is there also calculations with loans whereby we have to multiply the 12 or the 4 with the period?
Yes. So in this case, I didn't have to multiply anything because right at the start of my question, and obviously now I've gone and crossed it out, so you know, right in the start or in the information of my question, it said a period of 54 months and my interest is compounded monthly. So those 2 timelines match. I don't think need to do any calculations. However, if they had said to me, he agrees to repay the loan over a period of 4.5 years. So let's say they didn't say 45 months, they said 4.5 years. Then what you would need to do is say, for example, in this calculation, you would need to say 4.5 times 12 to get 54. And in this calculation, we would have had to say 4.5 years minus 1 year gives me 3.5 years, and then 3.5 times 12. So it's only really if the period unit of time and the compounding unit of time don't match. But here, because I told you it was a period of 54 months and it's compounded monthly, I kind of did the calculation already for you. However, in the last question, so this question here, it said specifically 9 years, but my compounding period was monthly. So that's why here I had to times by 12, because I had a time in years, but it was compounded every month. So I needed to multiply to figure out how many times I'm actually adding interest.